Mott, Scat, Ryben, Elliot.
Long ago, the four podcasters lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when the Australian nation attacked. Only the Doofcast, master of all four podcasters, could stop them. But when the world needed it most, it vanished. 100 years passed and we discovered the new Doofcast. Although its podcasting skills are great, it has a lot to learn before it's ready to save anyone. But I believe the Doofcast can save the world.
Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of duffmedia.com. My name is Scat Dolly, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Mott Fremen. Mott?
How you doing, Scat? I'm really excited to talk about this movie today. Thrilled to talk about the live-action version of Avatar, M. Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender.
That is right. This week on the show, we are continuing our Deconstructing director series with the 7th entry in our discussion of the films of M. Night Shyamalan. 7 movies we've gotten to, Matt, now. It's crazy. We're talking about 2010's The Last Airbender. Please note this will be a full spoilers discussion of both the film and probably some spoilers for some of the show. Not too much, but just going to put that warning in there just in case. Don't want someone to be shocked if we spoiler something on the show. But then we are going to wrap everything up with a very brief spoiler-free review by yours truly on the new Stephen King adaptation, It, Chapter 2. And talk about that for a little bit, and then we're going to wrap up this episode. It's going to be a good one, Matt.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, genuinely.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's just get right into it, and let's talk about The Last Airbender.
You are the last of your kind, all that remains of a once powerful nation.
I knew you were real. I always knew you returned.
You are the only one who can bring balance to a world at war. But some will stop at nothing to destroy you.
Our destinies are tied, Zuko.
We started a rebellion.
Okay.
All right, Matt. This is one, this is one we've been kind of both dreading and been excited about for a while now. This is the only M. Night Shyamalan movie I had not seen going into this little project of ours. So this was a movie I got to experience for the first time. And, oh boy.
Yeah.
What happened? What happened to my boy, man?
Yeah, they massacred my boy. It's about as bad as they say, right? Roughly, more or less.
Let's be honest here. This was kind of built up to us both by the members of our Discord and just the world at large about how infamously bad this movie is. And at the jump here, I'm gonna say this is not a good movie. I am not going to be sitting here defending this movie. I'm not going to do what I did with The Happening and be like, actually, no, it is good because it's supposed to be bad. This is just a bad movie. This is a movie where a lot of bad choices were made. A lot of decisions were made that I don't agree with, and a movie that, independent of how it stands as an adaptation, is just a not very well constructed film. Just bottom line. I kind of don't think it's like the worst movie I've ever seen. Like, I feel like that's what it was built up as. It's definitely not good, but it's just kind of like dull and boring, and it doesn't work. It's not like, I guess maybe I've watched a lot of bad movies, especially for the old Phantom Zone podcast. So I've seen some of the worst of the worst of the worst. This is not that. It's not good, but it's not like a disgrace to the idea of film. It is not a movie that makes me say suddenly, oh, actually, M. Night Shyamalan's not good.
I do think it reveals some weaknesses in his skill set.
That is fair. Yeah.
That doesn't make him not good. It doesn't retroactively ruin his other movies. I think a lot of the hate comes from the fact that the show is so beloved, and you can't help but draw the comparisons. And I think that's actually something we're going to avoid talking about too much on the show today, because I mean, it's really easy to point out, they messed it up, right? Like, the show is this great narrative with great characters, and those were the main things they failed to convey, right? I think they successfully conveyed the visuals. I thought the bending looked fine. I thought the costumes looked fine. I thought the settings looked pretty cool, actually. It was the stuff about the show that was actually charming and endearing and loving and lovable that was completely ignored.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's, I mean, I guess, just to start out, like, I really think that the core problem was the script. Actually, I don't actually think it was the directing. I think there are a lot of problems with the directing that we're going to talk about. Yeah. But I think the script is the main problem. The only reason this movie even partially works is because the source material is so strong that even if you butcher the story of the first arc, you still accidentally end up with a semi-coherent narrative.
I think that's very fair. Yeah. And I mean, the thing we have to say is we both have not only watched, but we studied the show. So we are entering this knowing a lot about this world already. So we're adding a lot of knowledge about the characters that are on display in front of us that is not earned through the film itself. And that's kind of an impossible thing to separate when you're watching this. So like I was telling you right before we started recording that I think watching the show and then watching the movie makes you hate it more, but also makes it work a little bit better because like who Zuko is. And so even if the movie does absolutely nothing to characterize Zuko, you have who he is in your head. So you can add that into what we're being seen on screen. And that makes you like I would not know what is going on, I think, if I had just watched this movie, because I don't think, besides Aang, maybe, I don't think any character in the script is characterized at all.
Yeah, I mean, we've got our main cast of the hero kids, right? And then they're the kind of the side character like Uncle Iroh, or in this movie, Iroh. Man, okay, I'm just gonna comment. How do you get every name wrong? Every single name.
It must have been a choice. Like, it had to have been a choice. Like, it doesn't make sense for that to just have been an oopsie, right?
Yeah.
And I guess we should say, like, there's people that have probably read and studied a lot about the production of this movie. I was talking to Elliot, our friend from MediaMD, before we started recording, and he mentioned a lot of production issues with this movie. One of the rules we have is we don't really look into any of that stuff before we record, because we want to kind of take it just from what we saw. So we don't know any of the backstory behind this. So it might be that this might be something that Shyamalan has talked about in interviews about why it was intentional, why he decided to do it. But it had to have been. It absolutely had to have been. Because it's not like it's one actor that does it, and just like this actor for some reason couldn't get over the mental block of saying it wrong. They all do it.
Well, and it's not just like an accidental oopsie. Like the word avatar, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in whatever language the word avatar comes from, and it is actually pronounced avatar. I don't know, and I kind of doubt it. I might be wrong, but like in English, it's definitely avatar.
Yeah.
But every single person in this movie says it in the weird way. Like there was one sentence where they're like, "Ong, are you the avatar?" And it's just it's like every vowel in that sentence is wrong. I mean, Aang, right? Aang. Okay, we've talked about the names enough. I just had to get it off my chest. It was the one thing where I was like, this just sticks out so much that we can't not address that as being a weird adaptation choice.
Yeah, it's low-hanging fruit, but it's fruit worth grabbing, because it is just, I think it is symptomatic of the adaptational choices throughout. Like, it's not that I don't think this respects the source material. It doesn't, but it's not like it doesn't care about the source material, with one or two exceptions.
It cares about like mawkishly ripping off the visual patina of it so that they can have the trailer look just like the cartoon.
Sure.
I mean, I actually think they did a good job with the visuals. I don't really
I do too.
Other than like the editing and the directing, the actual visuals themselves.
Like the costume
were great.
design, the VFX generally, the settings, the locations. I think it all looks pretty good. I mean, I think the Northern Water Tribe city looks pretty great. I liked it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so let's focus on the script though. Let's get into this because I think one thing you're talking about is the characters, and I think the one thing I thought about a lot, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this movie because it's kind of it confounds me, is what made M. Night Shyamalan decide that he wanted to make this film, right? And I think I know enough about the creation of this movie to know the story that like his kid wanted to be Korra for Halloween, and he was like, "What's that?" And then so he started watching it, and it became like a family activity to watch Avatar with his family. And so it was an important thing shared amongst the Shyamalan family. And so he decided he wanted to try to make this, and he wanted to try to write it. But here's the thing. It's very clear to me via the script that Night does not give a shit about Sokka, about Katara, about Zuko. The only character he seems to actually care about, and the only thing he's interested in actually exploring, is Aang. We should just call him Aang so we can separate him from, because he's a completely different character from the show. Is Aang's story, and only specifically the part of Aang's story that is the ran away from responsibility part. That is the thematic meat that M. Night Shyamalan decided to latch onto, and it is the only part of this movie that gets any kind of dramatization, any kind of character movement, any kind of arc is that. And I get that because I think that's interesting too. And if you think about it, I think that ties into the themes that M. Night Shyamalan likes to explore elsewhere, right?
Absolutely,
like if you look at his movies, like this idea of rejecting responsibility, of not doing the things you want to do, of being the sad and depressed outsider that ran away from what they were supposed to be doing or failed and need to get back to that. That's M. Night Shyamalan. That's what he does. So it makes a lot of sense that is the part that gripped onto him. But my response then is, I can't think of a worse person to adapt the source material than M. Night Shyamalan. And I love him. He is one of my favorite directors. I really think he's skilled as a writer. I just don't think this is the type of thing he should be doing. It's not where his interests lie. And I think a lot of the script problems come from this. It's not even that he doesn't. I think he's a smart person. I think he understands what Avatar is. I don't think he's dumb. I just don't think he is as interested in the mechanics of the parts of it that made it great, you know? And so he latches on to the only the things he cares about, but he's latching onto it from an adaptation perspective. And all that does is make it really clunky and weird and just thematically inconsistent.
Yeah. I mean, it's always necessary to pare things down when you're turning a season of TV into a movie, right? Inevitably certain characters were going to be left by the wayside.
Sure.
Not at all surprised that Uncle Iroh did not get delved into deeply in this movie.
No.
But yeah, like you said, we get nothing from any of the other characters. Sokka is just nothing. Katara, you get tricked into thinking she's a character because she has the narration.
But no, she's nothing.
She's nothing.
There's nothing. Like, what is movie Katara? Like, what does she want? What is her? Who is she?
Right.
None of these questions have answers because none of it is characterized. And it's funny because it hits all the beats, right? Like, we get the beat of Zuko. We learn about his past with his father and his motivation. We get a little bit of Sokka and his dad and his responsibility as an older brother. We get a little bit about Katara and her mother. We hit these beats as perfunctorily as possible, like going through the motions of what happens in the first season of the show, but none of it is dramatized. None of it is focused on. None of it is explored. It's just like, and then we have the scene where they do this and we move on. He doesn't. It's like the movie doesn't care about any of that at all.
Yeah, right. I think like the one scene in the movie where I felt like there was an attempt at functional storytelling was when Zuko is just having a conversation with Uncle Iroh. Iroh's trying to convince him to stop following the Avatar, and he kind of gives a bit of a, but even that is written in a very, I mean, I don't know. Okay, it's written poorly, and here's the thing. I don't think I would care that it was written poorly if the movie around that scene worked fine. Like that's one thing that we talk about a lot, actually, is like you can forgive bad child actors doing a pretty mediocre job. You can even forgive some story flimsiness if there is some kind of heart, something about the movie that you like, something that connects to you on a human level. Mm-hmm. And that's what's baffling to me about this movie, is that M. Night Shyamalan is a genius at that specific thing. I think I even connected to Mark Wahlberg's character in The Happening. The movie was chaos, but I still connected to his character. Mm-hmm. Even despite all of that. In this one, it's like he forgot how to write scripts, Like that's how bad the script is, and that's why I like to focus on the script rather than, I mean, I'm sure we'll get to the direction and some of the specific shots that are just baffling, but like, it's, you wouldn't believe this was a Shyamalan script if you didn't know. It is so mind-boggling. Like, just speaking, like, why don't we care? Why don't we feel heart? Why don't we feel the moments with the characters? And I think it's because the character introductions are so weird. They are so strange. It's like what an alien who has never seen people interact with each other would assume two people meeting each other for the first time. Like, the first time Katara and Aang talk to each other, it is the weirdest fucking scene of all time. She walks into a tent, he's putting on a shirt, and they have this awkward, stilted conversation. He's like, I ran away. Oh, lucky. And it's just like, it's so weird. And they have no emotion, and they're just standing at each other. Nobody introduces themselves. Nobody like talks like human beings talk to each other. Yeah. And like, look, M. Night Shyamalan writes weird dialogue. We've said that from the very beginning, from movie one of this thing. The way he writes how humans speak is a little different from how humans speak. And from other movies.
Sure. Yeah, sure. But there's always been like, I'm not going to say a reason for it, but like it's worked in specific ways. And we've talked about some of those ways in the past, but it's just like it helped. It was an important part of either characterization or tone setting or scene setting or anything like that. This is not that type of movie. This is not a movie where characters are kind of off a little bit and are interacting weirdly with each other for certain reasons because they're hiding something. Like, it's just weird. It's just strange for no reason.
So just as a complete theory or guess or whatever, but like, I do wonder if that dialogue delivered the way Shyamalan was imagining it being delivered would magically work somehow. Like imagine scenes from The Sixth Sense and replace Haley Joel Osment with Ong from this movie. Mm-hmm. And you can maybe imagine what I'm talking about, where sure. Like, he's not the worst actor in the world, but neither is he like a career defining performance that, sure. and so the charm that Haley Joel brings to something with like a stifled smile as he turns his face away from Bruce Willis or whatever, all of that is absent. All of the subtext is absent. We just have the sentences, and like you said, when you just have the reading of the lines, it comes across really, really strangely.
Yeah, I like that, because I think there's an argument you could make that the reason why Ong might be so strange in the scene is because he's clearly hiding something, because he's hiding the shame he feels for what he did, for running away from his family, and he's confused and doesn't know what's going on, and is trying to hide the fact that he ran. But except he like comes right out and says, "I ran away from home." Like, yeah. It's just whatever. I do see a better actor might have handled the kind of sneakiness or like attempt to lie a little bit better that might explain why his dialogue seems so stilted and weird in that scene. Fair.
But to be clear, I'm not blaming the actors. I'm blaming him for writing dialogue that can't possibly be dramatized successfully by teenagers.
Also, when you're a 7-time filmmaker making $130 million project, like you're big enough at that point, you can find the actor that can do the job, right?
Yeah.
Like that is possible. It is possible to find the actor that can handle this.
Well, yeah, that kid was really good at Taekwondo, though. So
well, sure. So that's all that matters, right?
I mean, that seems to have been the rationale.
Yeah.
But yeah, like seriously, that was a scene like in a tent. They could have done as many takes as they needed, you know?
Yeah.
And that was one where my favorite thing about that scene is Aang, as the scene ends, he kind of like looks to the side at his little glider, and then he like gestures toward it, and then like looks at Katara, looks at it, and then like reaches for it, and you're like, oh, he's gonna show her the glider. Cut to the next scene. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
It's so like, and I'm like 100% sure that was gonna be a scene where he explains the glider, and then they were like, oh, we got to cut this, and it was just the worst. It was just the worst cut in any Hollywood movie that actually made it to the screen I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this movie is paced and cut weirdly like that. Like, I think a part of the awkwardness of that scene is the editing of the scene. Like, his editing controls pace, right? It's how you pace your film. Yeah. And that scene and most of these scenes are edited so awkwardly, where it's just like you hang on a shot for too long. The particular framing that you chose, like, we're gonna get into this, I think, specifically later, but there are some really key, dramatically important scenes in this movie that are shot from a extreme close-up of Aang's face, where his face is filling the entire frame, and there's no like filmmaking is a language, right? That conveys something. When you choose to use an extreme close-up in that way, it conveys meaning. The problem is it doesn't have any. And like, you and I spent an hour and a half talking about The Sixth Sense and talking about how all these different scenes, what M. Night Shyamalan decided to do with the camera, where he cut, where he moved, where he used a oneer, where he used a close-up, how all of these things conveyed things. They conveyed tone, they conveyed meaning, they conveyed the language of the movie. And in this movie, it's just like, why is this here? And I sat with this, and it's not like, I'm not saying like I'm the most brilliant person in the world and I'm always going to be able to detect the meaning behind a shot. But I feel like if I watch a movie 3 times and I sit with certain scenes for a while and I can't come up with a reason for it, something's wrong.
Yeah, the mega close-ups were one of the weirder elements in terms of the camera work. Mm-hmm. And I didn't watch it 3 times. But when he chose to do them, it was always just a time when any other filmmaker would have just said, like, yes, I mean, this should maybe be a close-up, or this should maybe be, I mean, this should probably be a shot showing Aang's reaction or showing that he's struggling. But filling his whole face, filling the whole screen with his face, and then on top of that, he's not even really emoting that much. I keep sounding like I'm ragging on the actors. It's more like you just shouldn't make that shot.
Yeah. Well, and you need to cut around from it, right? Like, yeah. I think that shot would have worked in that particular scene. And the scene we're talking about here is where it's this big important scene where Sokka's like, hey, we should go to the Northern Water Tribe. They will have a waterbender that can teach you waterbending. And while we go, we can stop at all these towns and we can free the people. It's like a big, it's the act end scene of an act of the movie. It's big, it's important. And it's okay to have a close up to emphasize that. But it shouldn't just be a close up. That entire scene is a medium that has both Katara and Sokka in it, and then an extreme close up of Aang's face. And that is the two things it cuts back and forth to. And it just doesn't work. Like you need some mediums on Aang. Like a close-up should be like you go from a medium to a close, like to emphasize, right?
Yeah.
And it just doesn't do that. So it's just clunky. It's just weird. And look, the DP of this movie is a man named Andrew Lesnie, who is an Oscar award-winning cinematographer who did the cinematography for all 3 Lord of the Rings films. Like this isn't like a rookie guy, right? Like this is someone that knows their shit. And the editor for this movie is a guy who's been editing for years. He did Terminator 2. He did The Abyss. Like he worked with Jim Cameron for years and years and years. So it's not like these are new people that don't know what they're doing. So, I mean, the blame has to come back to the man helming the ship, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know who makes exactly what choices here, but we do know that he likes his weird shots.
Yes.
And he just has a weird way of shooting stuff in general.
And I want to say, like, I want to get to them. We don't have to do it right now, but there are some beautiful shots in this movie. I think there are some moments in this movie that I think it is very beautiful and it is very emotional and impactful. They are few and far between. They are definitely not the vast majority of the movie, but there are a few. There are a few M. Night Shyamalan moments where I'm like, oh, there's my guy. I found him. Where was he for the other 100 minutes of this movie?
Yeah, I feel like we both agree that the first like hour is the most intolerable.
Yes.
Overall. It kind of picks up. At least stuff is happening in the last bit where you're no longer just bored in addition to being baffled.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you already basically said the character introductions are so bad, and all of the, you know, I'm forced to compare it to the show because it's the perfect way to do it, where you introduce all these main characters, you show what their deal is, what they want in life, what their struggle is, what their personal flaw is that they're going to be struggling with. And then you set them on a path where the only way for all 3 of them to resolve their issues is to go on this journey. And this movie does none of that. It's just, well, I don't even know what it is. Like I'm trying to remember in this movie, I guess they want to, I guess, yeah, that Aang has to be the Avatar. He has to learn all the styles, and it's just so bloodless, you know? It's I guess that's technically the reason, that's technically the motivation, but it's inhuman, right? It's not connected to the personal motivations of these characters and why they would actually want to do that, instead of just like, well, I guess I'm going into hiding for a while. Yeah,
and I mean, to the film's credit, it did try. It just didn't succeed. Like I think the movie tried to establish Sokka as the guy, like the like protective older brother / hunter who is like trying to be this manly man and like failing. It tried to do that, but it didn't pull it off. I think it does. I mean, it shows Katara as this water bender, the only one that exists in her tribe, and she's not very good at it. But she's imagining her mother. Like it tries to lay the pieces. It just doesn't ever pick up the pieces again after they've been laid down the first time. So it's never about those pieces. They're just like moments that just we move on from. And so yeah, it really doesn't work. And look. We've been talking about these side characters, and we have to say, in a movie that is an adaptation of a season-long television show, you are never going to be able to characterize your side characters as much. It's just not ever going to happen, right? It's an impractical thing to be able to dive into these side characters as much. But I think the movie fails Aang too, and that there's no excuse for that. He's your protagonist, and I think Shyamalan had this idea to take the guilt and the pressure and the responsibility of being Avatar as this thing that Aang ran away from, and the movie is a journey of him discovering the necessity of doing that, right? The end of the movie is the moment where everyone bows before him, and this time he bows back, and that's, you know, symbolically taking the mantle. But it does it in this really clunky way that I don't understand. I think the finish line is good. I think every beat along the way doesn't work. And there's this thing midway through the movie and to the end where Aang is like no good at waterbending, and then Aang starts to get good at waterbending, and then there's a side plot where it like he's really, really good at using it defensively, but he like can't attack with it. And I don't understand what that has to do with anything. Because like I can make an argument in my head that the reason why he's so afraid every time he uses waterbending is because waterbending means he's the Avatar, and being the Avatar means this mantle of responsibility that he doesn't want. So every time he thinks about trying to do this, he's aware of the mantle, which reminds him of his failure and what resulted, and the blame and the guilt that goes with all that, and it's too much pressure for him. I get that. But why only on the offense? Like, why show him as defensively skilled at this? Just make it so he like won't do waterbending at all. Like he just can't do it. And it starts to do that, and then it goes down, like chases this rabbit hole of like the Avatar would never hurt someone. They only help people, right? And I was like, that's not his arc. His arc is not like hurting people. Like it has nothing to do with what his story is in this season. I mean, yes, we do get into that theme in later seasons of this television show, but in this movie, that's nothing to do with anything that's going on with him.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it occurs to me that the development for the show actually began in 2007 before season 3 came out. So it's plausible that while they were in development, they like started with the the theme of this movie is going to be Aang struggles to take up the mantle of the Avatar, and then later when they realized that the actual theme of the whole trilogy is this pacifism thing, then they shoehorn that in. But I'm like, yeah, but that was still only in 2007. The movie came out in 2010. So like there's no excuse to have that kind of incoherence in the character and in the script at that level.
Also,
like
Aang struggles to take up the role of Avatar is the arc of Aang in the first season of the show, and is the perfect thing to focus your movie on. Like if I were adapting this thing and I was trying to distill down my central theme of my first movie, if I'm going to try to make a trilogy of movies, that would absolutely 100% be it. Why are you trying to pull other things into it? It's a simple, relatable theme, right? Like responsibility. Like this great responsibility is thrust on someone who didn't ask for it and is forced to reckon with it. And his first reaction was to run away from it. And now he must live with the consequences of that. And seeing those consequences is what forces him to finally realize he must do this. That's great. That's a great storyline. Focus on that. Make that your movie night, and you've got a movie. Yeah. And he just doesn't. It's like he tries to get there, and he almost gets there. And I think the end, one of the beautiful scenes in this movie is Aang raising the water above, like making this tidal wave of water, and just like fully embracing waterbending, therefore fully embracing avatarness. And I think it's a beautiful emotional scene, but everything that led to that did not earn that moment.
Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff with Zuko I thought worked pretty well, but I think that might just be because I know Zuko from the movie or from the show.
Well, that's the weird thing. Let's talk about that a bit, because Zuko and Aang don't really interact in this movie.
There's
one of them is always unconscious.
There's the blue spirit thing. So I don't know if I want to derail what you were going to say, but I did want to tie this into the idea that being an adaptation, he basically took a bunch of what seemed like exciting scenes from the first season, like the blue spirit prison break thing, and put them in the movie.
Yes.
And as cool as the blue spirit scene was in the cartoon, it's actually just kind of an action scene. There's not a lot to it. Like
no.
You only really think that's a fun episode because you care about everything that's happening, and then when he takes off his mask and you're like, oh, it's Zuko, and it's like so that could have almost been cut out of the movie entirely. Like where I'm sitting is like he either should have not included stuff like the blue spirit scene, which was pretty long, or he should have made this movie like half an hour longer and put in a whole bunch more moments of connective tissue.
Yeah.
Like, I think that you mentioned Lord of the Rings earlier. I guess you said it was the DP for Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Like, I just think about that movie. It's a long movie. I'm thinking of Fellowship. It's a long movie, but it has nine main / side characters. all 9 of them get a moment where you understand what their deal is and you kind of care about them. Maybe not Legolas and Gimli so much. Pretty much all the rest, yes. So like you can definitely fit in good heartfelt moments for 5 characters in a 2-hour movie, right?
Yeah.
They could have made this a 2-hour movie. Fine, leave in the blue spirit, but make us care about Zuko before that point. Like it felt. I think one problem is that it was rushed. It's not necessarily evident that the story is rushed because it's just kind of chaotic. But like ultimately, I think that's maybe the crux of it, is that he's trying to rush through all this stuff, and he's skipping all of the heart, all of the connective tissue in favor of like, oh yeah, we got to hit this scene. We got to hit this scene.
Yeah, it's as if doing the plot point is all that matters. It's like earning the plot point, dramatizing the plot point doesn't matter. It's just doing it. We did it. We checked that box. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So
yeah, and like, look, like who is the antagonist of this movie?
I mean, I think it's supposed to be Zhao.
Yeah. The problem is like basic story structure, right? Basic story structure. Protagonist, antagonist. They want mutually exclusive things and therefore must come in conflict with each other, right?
Yeah.
So like it seems the natural protagonist is Zuko, because Zuko wants Aang. Aang doesn't want to be had by Zuko. He wants to feel like, and you can kind of, what I thought the show did a good job of is tying, them thematically together, where they have both been removed from their quote unquote responsibility for different reasons, and both of them are searching to get it back, but that kind of leads through each other, and that's exciting conflict. That's not really here. Like, I mean, like, again, I think the way you establish that is you have those two characters interact with each other on more than one occasion. And there's this line in this movie where Aang looks at Zuko right before he runs away near the end and said, "We could have been friends." And that is not earned in this movie because they never talk to each other.
It's so cringe.
It's just like, I agree with Aang based on the show I watched,
right,
but there's nothing in this movie that would make him say that line. He's never hung out with this person except for he fought alongside him one time before he even really knew who he was.
Yeah.
And then when he finds out who he is, Zuko's unconscious and he leaves. He says stuff to him while he's unconscious and then leaves. And then Zuko is giving this dramatic emotional speech to Aang. Aang's in the spirit world. He's not conscious. And so while both characters are awake and conscious, they never really interact. They never have conversations. And it's just like that's an easy fix, in my opinion. Just make them interact with each other. And I don't mean to keep comparing to the show. I know we said we weren't going to do that, but there's a whole scene in this part of the season where Zuko has stolen Aang and they just talk to each other for like 10 minutes. They're just like talking about their philosophies and why they're in conflict with each other and why he wants to do this. And I just think Aang being there for those conversations is so important to their relationship. And it's just not there. None of it's there.
Yeah. Right. And this is more of a surface level nitpick, but just the fact that the actors are obviously like 10 years apart in age makes it not work for me either.
Yeah.
Like the Zuko's definitely older than Aang in the show, but it's not so much that it's like, really?
Yeah.
Friends?
Right. It looks like an adult man, talking to a child.
Right.
And
which is one of the things where you're like, I don't know if this guy deserves a redemption arc. He just seems like an asshole. He's just like he's just like a young man who it's kind of too late past a certain age. I don't know.
You know what the frustrating part about that is, Matt?
What?
I actually think the way in which the movie handles Zuko telling his backstory via asking a random kid in that Fire Nation. I think that's a
Yeah.
good idea. Like, I think that's a fun structural way of getting this information, of going to a random kid and saying, hey, what do you know about Prince Zuko? And like using that as a demonstration to Iroh as why he can't give up on this is because this is you can ask any random Fire Nationer and this is the story they're going to tell you. I think that's a good idea. I don't think it was done very well. I think one of the problems is Zuko like keeps adding flavor to the story when really it should just be the kid like going on and on about how embarrassing and shitty Zuko is. I think that would have accomplished what with the goal of the scene a lot better. But I think that's a good idea. I think like that idea to put that in the script is great. It's just not done well.
Yeah, I agree. I actually liked that scene. I agree it wasn't done well. I liked it better than everything that was around it in the movie. Therefore, it seemed brilliant to me at the time.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I agree that was a good way of doing that. That was actually like, oh, that's clever. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, I think we've put all the nails in the coffin of the script at this point.
Yeah. One more nail.
Okay, please.
The Northern Water City Princess.
Yeah, I mean that's all just.
It's like so much of the emotional core of the movie is resting on her being willing to sacrifice herself to bring back the moon spirit, right?
Yeah.
Because that is in microcosm what Aang was unable to do, right? It is her sacrificing, giving up herself for the greater good, which is what he ran from. So it is like a thematically true decision to like, but it has no weight behind it because who the fuck is this person? I don't know who this girl is. We've seen like 2 scenes with her, and
and one of them is I hate sand type
right
conversation.
But the fault there I think lies with like we don't need to understand who Princess Yu is. We need to understand who Sokka is, and therefore we can see her through his eyes, and therefore we see what she does as a true sacrifice and we feel it emotionally. But because Sokka is not a character at all, he's nothing. Like describe Sokka in this movie. I don't know. He's not really as goofy. He's like self-serious and weird and doesn't really do anything at all. Anything.
He's kind of a coward.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They kind of tried to make him funny and goofy. Like the opening scene is Katara dropping the water sphere on his head and he's like, oh, Sokka. But it's not, no, there's nothing there. There's nothing there.
Yeah, right.
You could remove him from the show or the movie and it's the same movie.
I don't even know how to begin attacking that. Yeah. I mean, you just have to contrast the difference between the show and movie there and be like, yeah, like he's comic relief in the show and there is no comic relief in the movie. Mm-hmm. There isn't at all. In addition to there not being any kind of heart whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, he's in the 5-man band structure. Sokka is the heart of the team. And that's so important to the function out. And that's the other thing. I'm sorry. There's so many things, Matt. The team structure of this movie doesn't exist.
Yeah.
No, Aang doesn't. When does Aang need Katara to do anything?
Never. I mean, he does everything, right? He breaks them out of the Earth prison. Yeah, I don't think there's any moment where the characters like make eye contact and smile at each other.
There is one moment when Katara saves Aang from Zuko by freezing him in place. So we have to give the movie credit for that.
Okay,
in the third act, Katara shows up and freezes Zuko in place and saves Aang. So
yeah,
that did happen.
But like, to repeat what I just said, like I actually can't remember a time when they make eye contact and exchange a smile or anything like that. Like
there's no bits where you see them like genuinely enjoying each other's company.
We're friends. We're a team.
Right.
It's always just like if they're talking, it's like intense conversations about like what are we going to do now?
Yeah. And I think there was an opportunity for that too, because the second act does this kind of montage thing where they're like going through the Earth Kingdom and freeing towns and like bonding together as teammates. And I think there's a way to do that in this movie structured the way it is, but it just doesn't do it.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Maybe I do want to blame the acting a little bit, but I'm going to blame the director for not giving better direction to the actors, though, because like the way Ong is played in this movie is basically like, oh, he's a monk.
Yeah,
he's a young monk. He's very serious. He's a bit tormented. Mostly he's just detached, though. Sometimes he feels pain when he realizes he lost his family or when there's a lot of responsibility on him. Mostly he's just very detached. Doesn't really have strong emotional reactions, unless it's like really dire, and then it's a negative emotional reaction. Contrast to Show Ang, very, very lighthearted, always laughing, always smiling. In fact, that makes it even sadder when Appa gets taken, and he's just like super pissed off and violent for a few episodes.
I mean, think of his first line in the show. The first thing he says in the show after being broken out of a sphere of ice is he looks at Katara and says, "Do you have a girlfriend?" Right? Like that is what Show Ang is, and there's none of that here. And it's not even that I needed him to be that same character. I think it's fine to take the character and say, I want to do something different with this character.
Absolutely. Yes. I'm not just saying their mistake was that they didn't make it the show.
Yeah.
Their mistake was that they made him a emotionless robot
they
alien.
made him nothing. Yeah. He's the emotional core of the entire film, and he's nothing.
Yeah. Right. This isn't John Wick. You don't want a protagonist who's very, very stoic. I mean, even that movie, he has reactions to things.
Yeah.
Like you said, the core of this thing is supposed to be the team and the interaction between the characters, and that is completely absent. And part of that is either the acting or, I would argue, the way it was directed. Because if you're going to direct a scene where one of the major things you're trying to convey is like, all right, the point of this shot is we're showing the deepening connection between Katara and Aang, or Sokka and Aang. Mm-hmm. And then you let that shot happen and it doesn't work. Then you try it again until it works.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk. I think we have officially beaten the script up enough.
Okay.
Let's talk about oneers.
Yes.
Let's talk about long takes, and let's talk about the infamous long take from this movie, which is the one that happens about halfway through the movie, where they are in a Earth Kingdom prison, an Earthbender prison, and Aang rouses the troops, and they beat back the Fire Nation, and it's this like detached, almost steady handheld cam oneer that zooms through the scene. And let's talk about how this is it's bad. And I don't just mean bad from like a subjective, I am a critic watching this movie and I don't think this works. I think this is just objectively, via the language of cinema, a bad scene. And I don't say that very often, Matt, but I think
objectively bad.
I think because I think this scene fails to convey the point of the scene. The point of the scene here is to establish, one, that Aang has guilt because what his absence has done is taken these once proud Earth Nation benders and reduced them to nothingness. And I actually kind of like the change. Like, so in the television show, this prison was on a ship. It was surrounded by metal, so the benders literally couldn't do anything. I actually like the change that they're just like, the earth is all around them, but they're just so cowed that they're just not going to do anything. I think that's a good idea. I like that. But so he sees this and he's going to rouse the troops, and his presence and his fighting encourages all the other benders to stand up and fight back. And I think the way this scene is shot fails to convey any of that. It just doesn't do it. It's the most baffling, confusing cinematographic choice in the entire movie.
Yeah, it's shot like it's just supposed to be cool.
Yeah,
like it's just like, I mean, it reminds me of like a literal teenager being like, yeah, it would be really sweet to have just like the camera whoosh through as like the bending is going everywhere and the people are flying around and it's badass, man. Like that's how it feels to me. It's just indulgence without any kind of like like economy of time of like what is being shown.
Well, look, I think actually, and you might not agree with this, I think conceptually, I think it's a good idea. This is the first time that all four elements are going to be present in the same scene together. We're going to have air bending, we're going to have water bending, earth bending, and fire bending all together at the same time. And the idea conceptually of let's keep the camera going, let's not cut, let's sweep through and show what it looks like when these four elements are used against each other in a fight. That's a great idea. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Well, I mean, so here was my take on what they could have done to make it work. And I'm not saying this is definitely the way to do this or the only way to do this, or I'm not even saying this would have fixed it. But one thing that I notice about most oneers or most long takes is that they either follow one person, or if they don't follow one person, then they follow one person for a while and then they, in a very calculated way, switch to a different person. Mm-hmm. And they let you stay with that character. That they're usually careful to show that person's face as much as possible.
Yeah.
Or if not their face, at least hear their voice so that you kind of know what's going on. In this, the camera is literally just whooshing around. It will whoosh around Aang once or twice. Then it goes over. I don't remember the order of events. I didn't watch it that many times, but like it's just going wherever. It's going wherever things look cool. It's going where you would cut to if you were showing like, shot of Aang doing a wind punch, cut to wind punch hitting Fire Nation guy. Except instead of cutting, the camera just follows that.
Yeah.
So it's literally just the way you would shoot an action scene, like normally, except for some reason done with one shot in a way that shows all of the like extras standing in the background not reacting appropriately, and or like groups of not even like extra prisoners, extra soldiers, other main characters just kind of standing there like being told like look concerned. And it's just like I couldn't help but notice that. Like that was what my entire attention was on, the background for that scene, because I was like, oh my god, like this is just like no one has been told what to do. It's
so much of fighting is in action movies is kind of like wait in line to fight the main character,
right,
and normally you can hide that pretty effectively with cuts and different angles that you don't notice that like six other guys are just standing around not doing anything. But you can't hide that when you're doing this wide shot oneer. And look, it's like, it's not that it's impossible to do action scenes in one shots. Like there's a movie I saw at Fantastic Fest here called One Cut of the Dead, which is like a 30-minute zombie movie that is one take. The whole 30 minutes is one take, and it's hilarious and effective and wonderful. It's great. Everyone should see that movie. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, I was I know there's a lot, right? But I was thinking of Children of Men because that has a few very long takes that are action, and it's the one I'm most familiar with.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's one where you're usually following one character, like the camera is just following them.
Yeah. But everything here is flat. It's slow. It's clunky. Like there's no propulsion to the action. It doesn't actually feel like the two sides are struggling against each other. Like and that kills the emotional weight of the moment. Like with the moment, you're supposed to cut to these Earth Nation people and see this team of Earth Nation people that have been inspired to finally stand up and fight back. Like it's supposed to build to this moment, right? Aang declares himself the Avatar. He takes off his covering, shows that he's an Airbender, says he's the Avatar, starts fighting back, and it's supposed to be, it would be really great. It'd be really great if we could cut to like moments of Earthbenders surrounding the area, like watching this and kind of bewildered but still uncertain, and then like you see one of them finally like stand up and step up. And that's what it's desperately trying to do, right? Because there's this moment where a firebender launches some fire, and it's at that little kid that got arrested earlier, and her father his father lifts a piece of rock to block the fire. And that's supposed to be the moment. That's supposed to be the emotional moment of the scene where it's like, he did it. Look, just Aang's presence here did this. And it just falls so flat because it's so awkward. It's so clunky. Like, cutting matters. Cutting builds weight. You shouldn't be afraid to cut sometimes. And when you're doing a oneer, it's because you're building a different kind of thing. Usually it's tension. Usually it's like it's excitement. And it fails here. And Matt, M. Night Shyamalan's not stupid. Like, he's a good filmmaker. Like, that's the thing I keep coming back to is I have zero doubt in my head that he would look at this scene and say, this is a bad scene. This doesn't work. But I also know M. Night Shyamalan is a peculiar director who doesn't do things the way normal people work. And I think just the nature of filmmaking with a movie this big, I think it was too late. I think by the time they realized that this wasn't working, there was nothing else they could do. Because you think how long Previs had to go on to do all the special effects. I also know M. Night Shyamalan is the type of director that doesn't film coverage. And for those of you that don't know, coverage is basically like just like quick pickup shots of like different angles of like characters like just doing like standing there or reacting in a certain way. It's basically like a safety net. It's like in case you missed something that wasn't working or there's a continuity error that's not working, you have extra little bits and pieces to piece together in the edit. And he doesn't do that. And when you don't do that, if you realize the oneer isn't working and you have no coverage that you filmed during the oneer, you can't split the oneer up and fill it with coverage because you didn't do any. Yeah. And so I just feel like I there's no doubt in my mind that if you sat M. Night down in an interview, he would, if he was being 100% honest, he would say, yeah, this is a bad scene. The scene doesn't work. It fails. But I think he got himself into a position where it was too late. And I mean, I think that to me is the movie as a whole.
Yeah. The question for me, and I agree completely with everything you just said. The question for me is why he even tried. And I think it's almost a kind of like artistic, I don't know what the right word is. Like he doesn't want to do it the normal way. I feel like
it's arrogance. I think he's an arrogant filmmaker at times.
That's what I was thinking about saying. But like I feel like you or I or the listener who's listening to us right now could probably like storyboard out that fight much better than it actually ended up being. Just like how would a normal director shoot this? We all understand the language of cinema because we've watched a billion movies. You know how you would do it. I imagine Shyamalan being like, okay, this is my first big multi-person like battle kind of scene. I'm not going to do it normal. I'm going to knock everybody's socks off. I'm going to do it a really cool, unique, original way. We've got this, he's an airbender, so it's going to flow. The camera's going to flow around like air. Get it? Like, and the thing is, I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like I can even imagine it would have worked. Like, if it were in CGI and you had like infinite time to manipulate details and like have the camera like go faster and slower as needed, or like catch facial expressions at appropriate times. Fantastic. It's not actually, I don't actually think it's the worst idea in the world. Like I'm pretty sure like they kind of do similar things in Endgame. It's obviously a digital camera, a fake, it's all CGI. So they can catch all of the facial expressions and exact moments they want to catch, whereas this was a very expensive mistake, right? I think you nailed it there. I think this is exactly what's happening with this particular scene. And I want to compare it to a later scene that uses a similar technique. It's not quite the same. There is a fight later in the movie after Aang has been broken out of prison by the Blue Spirit, where he gets like put in the. He's at the air temple, right? And so he gets put in the training circle with the, I don't know what they are, the hangy wall things, right? Which are actually from Korra, weirdly enough.
Oh, really? Interesting. I think I think that, first of all, that's just a cool idea. That's like a cool set piece idea. And I think that's one of the more interesting action set pieces of the movie. But it's also kind of a oneer, right? The camera kind of goes a little freeform and moves around inside the circle. The camera's like trapped in the circle with Aang. And like you talked about earlier, the camera is really fixed on Aang here. It's not weaving around between people. It's fixed on our main character and circling around him as he's in this circle, using the stuff to force back people. He traps a guy in there once, which is really funny. I actually like that he traps a guy inside and the guy's like desperately trying to get out and then he can't. And so he like looks at Aang and is like, I guess I'll charge him then. And then it's immediately immediately thrown back. I think that all works. And the differences there are key. The difference, like you said, it sticks to Aang. It also is not a true oneer because it's cutting back and forth between his fight and Zuko's fight. It cuts back and forth. So we release that free-flowing camera. We get to reset and explore different angles in this more free-flowing circling. It's just that central idea, but executed in a better way.
Yeah, I do still have a couple of major complaints about that scene. One of which is, okay, yes, it is better, but there was definitely a long moment where you see Aang fighting in the foreground, and then you see Zuko being surrounded by like 500 guys, and he's just kind of doing like Taekwondo form, and they're just obviously just not attacking because they're extras. And it just looks
they were just
real bad.
Really impressed, man. They were just really
I guess
impressed.
So that was bad. My other complaint about that whole scene, and maybe I need to watch this again to verify that this is a real complaint, but it was just too dark, and you just got like dark kind of mono darkness, and then there's fire every once in a while, but the fire doesn't really illuminate so much as just wash out.
Sure.
And so it just makes it look bad.
Yeah.
Like it seems, I don't know if I want to blame color correction or if I want to blame just like there literally weren't enough lights on the scene, because it didn't really need to be that dark. Like there was no purpose.
I didn't have that problem, but I'm not going to call you wrong. I think.
Okay.
I mean, and like one thing in particular, speaking of Zuko in the back doing Taekwondo moves, I do think it's kind of weird, and I don't remember this being a problem in the show, but I feel like the moves that they have to do to bend are a lot more elaborate in this movie, and everyone just kind of waits around for the people to do their move before they do anything.
Yeah, I was gonna. It feels like a nitpick, but I think it matters actually, because it's more like they're casting an elaborate spell with their body, right? Whereas bending always felt like you do like one movement and then kind of an organic extension of that movement turns into bending.
Yeah. And I think the one thing in the movie that was true to that was the fire bending, because when the firebenders would kick, fire would come out. But everything else, it was like he was doing like Kamehameha setup stuff.
Right.
And I was just like, hey, we should attack him before he finishes his
exactly.
dance.
Yeah, because you would think that would be, again, on its face, not a terrible idea. Like it's kind of beautiful to watch people doing martial arts shit.
It's really great.
That's fine. The problem is exactly what you said. When you show the guy doing 16 moves in a row and he's surrounded by 3 people who are not attacking him for some reason, that's where it's like, okay, it has to work together. It has to work as a different components coming together and making sense.
Yeah. Speaking of beautiful martial arts, though, the most beautiful scene in the entire movie is Aang and Katara doing water bending, and then ash starts to fall from the sky. I think that is a beautifully composed scene, and I love it so much. And little hints of the movie that could have been.
Yeah. There's even the idea that he's kind of looking at her, although I'm not sure what he's feeling or thinking in that moment, because the movie didn't communicate it to me on any level. But like that feels like a scene that belongs in the Earth Bet version of this movie that was actually good.
Yeah. That's a reference that not everyone's gonna get, but it's fine.
Not everyone.
Remember when
another dimension? I'll just say it that way.
Remember when the bad guy's evil plan was to put a fish in a bag and then just stab it? That was just not a good idea. That was
well,
not a good
I mean,
idea.
that was kind of funny because you're like, hold on, like you're just assuming you're going to be able to successfully infiltrate their sanctum sanctorum.
Yeah, that was like
by
that
yourself,
was like the great
basically.
plan. It's the middle of the city. I gotta admit, like the waterbenders were like, we have to extinguish all fire before they get here, and then they didn't do that. Like there were definitely still torches everywhere, and they also like we have to keep as few of them from getting in the city as possible. And then all the firebenders just dug under the ice with their little diggy machines. And it's like, you guys suck at this. You're really bad at it.
Yeah, right.
No wonder the fire people are dominating you. I do think it's this is such a nitpick, but like throughout the entire movie, they're like the Fire Nation and their machines. And we don't really see any machines. Like when they come to the Southern Water Tribe, they're like, the Fire Nation is here with their machines. I'm like, what? The boat? Do you mean the boat?
They got big metal ships. they're steamboats, basically, right?
Yeah, is that what they meant by machine, though? The boat? Like I expected, like in the show, it's like they got like tanks and they got all this crazy shit.
Zeppelins.
Yeah, and you do see like there's one point where you do see a tank. That's how the Blue Spirit like sneaks in to the one place as he's riding on the bottom of a tank. But that's it. That's really like it's just like they keep talking about these machines, and like the only machines I see the infantry using are those little things that dig through the ice to get into the Northern Water Tribe.
Yeah. For some reason, that reminds me of the fact that Ozai should have just obviously not been a character in this movie.
Yeah.
That's minor. That's yet another minor script point where it's like, look, it should have just been. Or he should have been shot in a way that actually made him scary.
Well, it's like they tried to do that, right? Because there's a scene where, in a classic Shyamalan sense, you're seeing the back of the guy's head while he's talking to someone else. So you're seeing the back of Ozai's head, and then it does this cool shot where it's like this close up on his ring. And I think that's the closest we got to Ozai being intimidating, is when you can't see his face. But that's after a scene in which we've already seen his face, which is just a structurally weird thing to do. Like I don't get that.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe those were shot out of order or something.
Also, can we have to before we wrap up, we do have to touch on the controversy of the casting, though, because this was pretty controversial. Obviously, the Water Tribe is entirely white people, which is a little weird because they're wearing like Inuit clothing, but they're super white. And I think it's because Nicola Peltz, who plays Katara, was cast first, and she's white. So once she's cast, we have to make everyone else white, which we don't really have to do that. There are some like extras in the Water Tribe that look like Inuit people, but which is even more confusing. Yeah, all the main important quote unquote characters definitely not. And then the Fire Nation is just brown people because like.
Whatever, various.
Because like Asif Manvi is Indian, Sean Tube, I can't pronounce his last name, who plays Uncle Iroh, is Iranian. Cliff Curtis, who plays the Fire Lord of the Brown Nation, is he's Maori, right? He's like he's of Maori descent. So like it's just brown, which is not a great look movie at all. Which is weird because M. Night Shyamalan is Indian, you know, like just you could have you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I don't even know how to comment on this. I think everyone else has already said exactly what needs to be said, which is like this was an unforced error, basically. Like the show showed you exactly what to do here.
Yeah.
These are different ethnicities. They're obviously coded on existing cultures. The Fire Nation is obviously Japanese. The Water Tribe is obviously Inuit, or some kind of seafaring.
Yeah. Earth was Chinese, illusion. Right? I think. Is that right?
Earth was very Chinese influenced. Air, I believe, was actually Thai influenced, except that Aang looks very white, but
he does.
That's
so it's protagonist syndrome. Your protagonist has to be white.
It's protagonist syndrome, and also he's a kid. Maybe I don't know, whatever. It's not that important. yeah, I don't know. It's a very standard Hollywood thing to whitewash the cast. And that's not an excuse, by the way. That's just like, yeah, this happens all the time. It
does, indeed.
It's just, it was so like evident in this movie because there were so many opportunities to not screw it up.
Yeah.
And they just face planted on every single opportunity.
Well, and they didn't change. They changed the races, but they didn't change the coding of the architecture and the outfits, and that made it stand out even more. Exactly. Like if this is obviously supposed to be Japan, and this is like, and Japanese is like the one race that's not represented here somehow. Yeah.
This is obviously supposed to be, Aleutian, Native American, etc., and everyone's white. It's just
strange. Yeah. I think unforced error is the best way to describe it. It's like there's no reason you had to do it this way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else, Matt? I'm running out of. Look. There are parts of this movie I liked. I think I've mostly covered them, but there were moments. There were moments that I enjoyed.
Yeah, I would like to, I feel like we do know what was wrong with the movie. Like it's pretty clear. It's also fairly clear why, but I'd like to know more about why.
Yeah, we can finish.
And that's going to require. And then that's the thing is, I would like to read more about what happened behind the scenes with this movie. And I just glanced over a few things, and this did seem like a couple things I read made me think that Shyamalan was of the belief that, like, look, I just shot it the way I imagined it. I don't know how to shoot it any other way. That's how it was in my head. And which is like the worst. That's like one of the worst things he could have said in my mind. Like, because he could have said like, oh, I imagined it looking a certain way, and then due to a combination of factors, it just doesn't come out looking the way I imagined. I'm inexperienced with VFX, and I was going over my head with the complexity of the shots I was going for, and it just didn't work out. But it's more like, it came across at least more like him saying, no, I shot it exactly the way I wanted. And he's not even saying, and it's awesome. He's almost saying like, and I know it's bad, I just didn't know any other way to do it. And I'm like, that can't be true. Like, you've seen movies, right? Like just do it that way.
Look, I think he's saying exactly what you want him to say, but just in like a very politically guarded kind of way.
Maybe.
I mean, everyone fucks up. people make bad stuff sometimes. Like movie making is very, very difficult. And M. Night Shyamalan is a very by the pants type of director. He goes with his gut. That has been true through every single one of his movies. He goes with his gut. It's just his gut works a lot, and it didn't work here. I mean, the feeling I got from this movie as I was watching it is it was made by a writer and a director who was in over his head. This is the most expensive movie he's ever produced. This is the biggest movie he's ever produced. It has the most complicated action set pieces out of anything he's ever done. It's got VFX, which is something he's not really dealt with a lot. It's got a fair amount of characters. He's trying to, not only is all that going on, but he's trying to adapt a source material that is loved and vast and shrink. I mean, shrinking one season of television down into an hour and 45 minutes on its own is a huge challenge. And I just feel like he was in over his head. This is too much. And maybe, he just didn't have the passion for an adapted work that he does for his own written stuff.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. And I can definitely read his statement as him having too much of an ego, or maybe like you intimated, just not wanting to be like, yeah, I fucked up. I fucked it up, everybody. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm a fuck up. All right. But like him kind of acknowledging that there are problems and they're his fault. And that all makes sense. And it's unfortunate, right? Like, I guess maybe we can kind of zoom out a second, contextualize this. This is the 7th movie of his that we've done. it's by far the worst by like a huge margin.
Easily.
I mean, and again, for those of you who are maybe just tuning into this episode kind of out of the blue, Scott and I love all of the first 5 movies, and at least we can find something to appreciate about the happening, or at least we find it interesting, and Scott actually likes it. This is just like it's just disappointing, right?
Yeah, it is. It's very disappointing. I mean, I look at this and I look at the decisions and I'm like, I see why it happened, but I'm like, Knight, you're better than this. You know you're better than this. Don't do this. I mean, not only should you have never taken on this project, but you fucked it up. And like, I'm not gonna make excuses for the guy. Like, he fucked it up. He did. And you know, I go back and forth on whether I believe in the auteur theory or not. I think looking at the talent that was behind the camera on this movie, like we already talked about the cinematographer, the editor, the composer. I mean, Horner did the score for this again, which was like actually very similar sounding to a lot of M. Night's other movies. I don't know if you noticed that. Like the score sounds a lot like the Signs score to me. But there was a lot of talent behind this movie, and so this kind of, to me, I look at something like this and I'm like, this is like proving auteur theory, but like in the negative. Like it's like auteur theory exists, and look what happens. It's a shitty movie.
Yeah. Proof by like counterexample or something. Yeah. So this is my theory: is that he thought he could do this because he thinks he can do everything because he's Shyamalan. And then he realized he couldn't, and it was probably a big slap in the face, and he was probably hurt by it. And then my theory is that he was like, well, I want to try to remedy my shortcomings. And so the next movie he does is very effects heavy, and he's going to focus more on just being an effects director, and see if he can get his head around that. And then he realizes that that's a waste of his time. He doesn't enjoy it. It's not his thing. He's a storyteller who enjoys telling weird stories that he comes up with on his own. And then he goes back to doing that with the next movie. That is my mental model of where he is in his career and where he goes for the next handful of movies. Yeah,
and the next movie is the 2013 movie After Earth, which is a movie he co-wrote actually.
Right.
And I think it's been a while since I've seen this movie. I don't remember liking it particularly well, but I remember it being very Shyamalan-y, right? Like it is the type of stuff he likes to explore. So I'm kind of looking forward to that movie and seeing if maybe we could pull something else out of it we appreciate a little more, because it is really not his low point. I think this movie, The Last Airbender, is definitely his low point. But when he follows it up with After Earth, and it is just an abject failure, is really when he kind of just disappears for a while, and he doesn't come back until The Visit, which is him really trying to return to his roots.
Yeah.
And the Visit also marks the point where from The Visit on, these are all basically films that he's completely funded himself. The Visit, Split, and Glass are all movies that he paid for entirely out of his own pocket, because basically no one would work with him anymore.
Yeah, right. And I really do. I think I read something basically supporting the idea that The Visit was him more or less intentionally saying, it doesn't, like it, all that matters to me is that I get to be in charge, tell my weird story that I came up with, and do my thing. Because when I try to create based on others' visions, it just doesn't work. It's either terrible or it's mediocre at best. And I mean, I think that it paid off, honestly, because his career, I mean, I don't know if he's exactly, he's, I mean, you could say he's back, right? Like, I don't know if Hollywood's knocking down his door with more movies, but he's been financially successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think
later
Glass
movies
is one of his most financially successful movies since The Sixth Sense, I think, or maybe Signs. And he gets all the money because he put up all the money. He put up the $20 million for that movie, and it made over $100 million. So that's money in the bank. He is producing a television show for Apple. as well. So he's working on stuff that he's not paying for. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm very excited of getting to those movies and seeing. I think the thing that is going to be most exciting to me is these movies that we've for a while been in movies that both you and I like, but popular opinion on them is negative. With the exception of this one, I'm looking forward to getting into movies where the popular opinion has officially changed and seeing, well, what's the difference here? Why did we like Lady in the Water and no one else did, but then everyone likes Split? Why did that happen? I'm looking forward to that a whole lot.
Me too. And I've still not seen Split or Glass, by the way.
I'm very excited about those. I know for a fact you're gonna love Split. Glass is gonna be an experiment. As it was as a movie. So
cool.
To make the podcast even more negative than it already was, I wanted to talk about It Chapter 2 because it is the adaptation of one of my favorite books of all time. And I saw the movie this past weekend, so I wanted to talk about it briefly, Matt. I will not spoiler anything.
Okay.
Well, it's better than The Last Airbender.
Yay.
Yeah, so this movie, like, first of all, the first It movie came out 2 years ago. Basically, if you don't know, the structure of It is it's told in two different time periods. One when the kids are little, and then again 27 years later when they've grown up. And the way that it's structured is actually like it cuts back and forth between the two. So the concept is the adults have grown up and moved on and kind of forgotten everything that happened when they were kids, and they're forced to go back to the town of Derry where the book took place, and they're remembering things as they journey through the town, and then so we're flashing back to as kids. In the movies, they decided to do away with that structure, and the first movie was the entire kids portion of the story, and then this is supposed to be the entire adult portion of the story. Except it's not really, because they still do the whole flashback structure, just to different scenes when they were kids from the first movie. This, like, the confusing thing about this movie, Matt, is I actually really liked it, but I also think it's not a good movie because I think it fails in all the ways in which I think the book really succeeds in capturing the thematic resonance of what the story was about, and the structure of it just completely fails to do anything interesting with the second half. It's 3 hours long. It's freaking long, and it doesn't earn, like, I don't care if a movie's 3 hours. We're talking about Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. I watched the extended edition. That's 4.5 hours long. I'm fine with a long movie if it earns its runtime, and this movie did not. It spins its wheels in the second act, and then the third act is ridiculously long. Speaking of Lord of the Rings, this movie ends as many times as Return of the King ends, except it doesn't feel as epic because it's just, the story was just not that way. Bill Hader, though, is the MVP of this movie. He's so good. I love Bill Hader. I think he's amazing in this movie. And also the guy who plays the adult Eddie, whose name I'm blanking on right now. It is James Ranson. He's very good as well. But very mixed bag of a film. I don't know if I'd actually recommend it. I don't know if I'm ever going to want to watch it again. Better than the miniseries, though.
So do you think that, much like with Avatar, the only reason that you liked it at all was because it was based on a property that you loved?
Yeah, I mean, I love these characters so much. I love these characters so much. And there were moments where I saw the characters that I loved. And I still think the stuff with when they're kids is very good. I think the actors get along with each other very well. And that bond that we were missing from The Last Airbender between the characters and the team is there when they're kids. It's really not there when they're adults. And I get why that is. It's kind of supposed to be that way, but there's so much that the book is doing, and I know it's impossible to capture all that in the movies, but I think one of the things that's most important about what the book is doing is its structure, is this structural idea of going back to the place you were as a kid and remembering all this terrible stuff that happened to you. And I think sticking that structural landing in the movie was one of the most important and challenging things it could have done, and it failed completely at that. It failed completely at that. So there are moments in this movie that work really well, individual scenes that are scary and heartwarming and effective and very funny. It's a very funny movie. But when you look at the movie as a whole, it just fails. It just fails to do what it wants to do.
Well, Scott, I don't think I'm going to see it.
Yeah, I don't think you should. You should read the book though. Everyone should read it. It's a really good book. It's very long. It's a very good book.
Okay, I'll read it after I read The Dark Tower.
All right. Only 8 more patrons for that.
Yeah.
That was a clunky way of doing that, but we'll do it again in a second because that's all we had for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on The Last Airbender, which I'm sure you do, please let us know what you think. What did you think about what we said? Did you agree with us? Did you disagree? Do you like The Last Airbender? Email me, please, at doofmedia@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter at doofmedia.
Yeah, if you're not already subscribed to this podcast feed, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else that podcasts can be found.
And you can find this and all of our shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find Media MD, one of our newest podcasts. I always have trouble explaining what this one is because I just get to the word Fortnite in my head and I just freeze. And I'm like, What does that mean? It is a media review podcast like this one, but they one of the hosts prescribes. Thank you. Something for the other host to watch or read. I think they did The Boys recently, and what are they doing next week? Some weird thing that I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't. They actually do a lot of interesting stuff that I've never heard of.
They're much more broad with their stuff than we are with like we really stick to movies and TV and sometimes books, but they're like all over the place. I think it's a YouTube series called Tier Zoo. I don't even know what that means.
I don't either. I'm kind of curious now, though.
Yeah, but you can check out Media MD and Deep Impact and Do the Right Thing and what'd you say? Over at our website, doofmedia.com.
Yeah. Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
Yes, and if you want to support us beyond just reviewing our show, you can become a patron of Doof Media. You can go to patreon.com/doofmedia, pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford, and that'll help ensure we keep growing. Like we said, we have 8 more spots, 8 more patrons until we start doing our Dark Tower podcast, which, as you could tell from my It review, is something I am very much looking forward to. Stephen King's Dark Tower series is one of my favorite book series of all time, and I've been wanting to give it the deep dive treatment for a very long time, and we are very close to doing that. So every patron helps. It doesn't matter what level you donate on, $1, $5, any of it helps us get closer to that goal. So we really appreciate it if you guys would do that.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. We will see you all next week when we are covering, it's another patron produced episode, Matt. We're doing a video game this time, which is not something we do very often. We're doing a video game called The Beginner's Guide. It's a short little kind of one of those story-based games. But I'm very much looking forward to this. I have no idea what this is about at all. So we'll be back next week to talk all about that.
Cool. Can't wait.
I was going to do an Ong joke, but I just blanked. I just trying to think of a way to say goodbye with like an A sound that would be weird to pronounce, but I fucked it up. So
Flamio Hotman.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.